3.5, Example 1. In Example 1, we're going to look at taking the derivative of different trig functions that involve both the product and quotient rule. So for part A, we have y is equal to x squared times sine of x, and we want to determine y prime. So for this example, we have two functions. We have x squared, and we have sine of x. So I'm going to let x squared equal f of x, and sine of x equal g of x. This is where we absolutely need to use the product rule. So remember, if h of x is equal to f of x times g of x, then the derivative, h prime of x, is equal to f prime of x, g of x, plus f of x, g prime of x. So for this example, we definitely need the product rule, so let's take the derivative of each piece. So I have f of x is equal to x squared, so f prime of x is equal to 2x. And I have g of x is equal to sine of x, and g prime of x is equal to cosine of x, since the derivative of sine is cosine. And now all I need to do is fill in the missing pieces. So h prime of x is equal to 2x sine of x plus x squared cosine of x. Now for part B, I have that u of x is equal to cosine of x divided by 1 minus sine of x. And I want to determine u prime of x. So I notice that I have a division sign here, so I'm going to need the quotient rule. So I'm going to let cosine of x be my f of x, and I'm going to let 1 minus sine of x be my g of x. So recall the quotient rule is u prime of x is equal to f prime of x, g of x minus f of x, g prime of x, all divided by g of x squared. So the way I like to do this is I like to write all of my pieces off on the side and then substitute them back in. So I have f of x is equal to cosine of x. So f prime of x is negative sine of x. And I have g of x is equal to 1 minus sine of x. And g prime of x is equal to negative cosine of x. Because the derivative of 1 is 0, the negative comes down, and then the derivative of sine is cosine. And so then what I'm left to do now is just plug everything in. So I get this is equal to f prime of x was negative sine of x, g of x was 1 minus sine of x, minus f of x, which is cosine of x, g prime of x, which is negative cosine of x, all divided by g of x squared. And so now all we have to do is simplify. So we're going to go ahead and distribute this sine of x, and we get negative sine of x plus sine squared of x. Then a negative and a negative is going to make a positive, so plus cosine squared of x, all divided by 1 minus sine of x squared. And then we have a trig identity right here, and sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So we get negative sine of x plus 1 all over 1 minus sine of x squared. And then I'm just going to take the two terms in the numerator and rearrange them. So I get 1 minus sine of x all divided by 1 minus sine of x squared. And now I can do a little reducing. And so I get 1 over 1 minus sine of x. And that is the derivative. On your own now, I want you to try to take the derivative of negative x squared cosine of x. So I see right here that I have two functions, so I'm going to need the product rule. So I get f of x is negative x squared, so f prime of x is negative 2x. And I have g of x is cosine of x. So g prime of x is negative sine of x. And so the product rule states that. So y prime is equal to f prime times g plus f times g prime. So I get y prime is equal to negative 2x times cosine x plus negative x squared times a negative sine of x. So I get the derivative is negative 2x cosine x plus x squared sine of x.